And I'd really like to start off with any of our guests that we have out in the audience here. If you could stand and introduce yourselves, that would be wonderful. I'm Jan Martin. I'm here to talk about Age Friendly. Awesome.
Rob Fry with CDOT. I'm here to help discuss the year development plan.
I'm Wendy Pettit with CDOT Region 2 as well, and I'm just here for support.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County.
Juliet, League of Women Voters, an observer.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Hagan with HDR.
Ken Prather, PPACG.
Craig Casper, PPACG.
Thank you very much. And I think in the gang in the back, Jennifer and Kevin, if you want to go ahead and just reintroduce yourselves so everybody knows who you are.
Sure. Jennifer Valentine, Transportation Planner with PPACG.
Yeah, Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner with PPACG.
Rob McDonald, not a transportation executive director
Not
here at
anymore.
PPACG.
And Anna.
PPACG.
Great. Thank you very much. And for our guests, on their behalf, I'd like for us to go around the room.
Roger Armstrong, League of Women Voters.
John Dick, Town of Monument.
Ray Burgess, City of Woodland Park.
Greg Lauer, City of Fountain.
Vince Rusinek, citizen at large.
Al Creeley, citizen at large.
Fran Pitaro, Colorado Springs.
David Walker, City Manitou Springs.
Ellen Hasse, Teller County.
Cameron Dickner, City of Palestine.
Hannah Parsons with the Regional Business Center.
Kevin Walker, citizen at large.
Bob Baker, El Paso County.
Courtney Stone, citizen at large.
Jen Nellinger, El Paso County.
Rachel Beckhead with PPACG. Michelle Day, citizen at large.
It's great to have everybody here. Does it seem like we haven't seen each other in a while? It's nice to be here. Let's go ahead and move on to the consent items. The agenda, regarding the agenda, if it's okay with the group, we'd like to move item number 8 up into just under public comments. If y'all don't mind, we'll go ahead and do that by consensus. Are there any changes or additions, deletions from the minutes?
I've got one. I'm shown making a second, which I did, but I'm shown absent also.
Okay, that seems to be the toughest thing to get. So, Ann, if you can make those corrections, that'd be great. Can I ask to move that these be approved as changed?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks. Okay, public comments. Do we have anything outside of what's on the agenda that anybody needs to raise? Okay, Jan, you are up. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jan Martin, and I'm here this afternoon actually representing Innovations in Aging Collaborative, which is the organization that has sort of spearheaded our age-friendly city initiative. And I have a presentation that I'd like to kind of walk through here that I can find, if I can get things going here. Rob, do you know where things are here? I'm not that familiar with.
Minimize it, I think there.
Yes, right there.
And removable.
It should be already
click
open
up.
for you.
Yeah, it's
Those are already open for you. Those are all.
where it says Jan Martin. To your right.
Is it a PDF?
Nope, it's a PowerPoint. Oh dear, I don't see it. How can that be? Oh man.
It's on the desktop, hiding behind there.
Do the old rabbit trick.
It sure doesn't look like it's on there.
2015.
Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Oh, phew. Okay,
Yes.
here we go. Okay, I assume that most of you or some of you have heard about the Age Friendly City Initiative that we're doing in Colorado Springs. It's a collaboration with AARP and Innovations in Aging and the City of Colorado Springs. It was in April that AARP actually came to a city council meeting, met with the mayor, and the mayor signed off on Colorado Springs becoming a part of the Age Friendly City Initiative, which is from across the country. Cities all over the country are involved in this. Innovations in Aging is the organization that is actually spearheading this effort. And if you're not familiar with Innovations in Aging, they've been around since 2009 and really focus on aging issues in the Pikes Peak region. You know, I think, well, here's their board. You can see it's a real diverse board, and most agencies in our community who deal with aging in one form or another are represented on the Board of Innovations in Aging. The Board of Innovations in Aging in 2015 actually had Dr. Tucker Hart Adams, who is a state economist, do a report on aging in the Pikes Peak region. I happen to be a baby boomer. Some of you might be too. And as you know, there's literally a bubble moving through society of the baby boomers. And according to Tucker's report, today, this is as of today, 10,000 people a day are turning 65 in the United States. That's a big number. Over 65 in Pikes Peak region. In 2010, there were 68,000. By 2040, we expect to have 173,000. And as you look on the slide, you can see that we expect 179% change in the growth of the aging population in Colorado Springs over the next 30 years. So what is age-friendly? Age-friendly Colorado Springs really helps make sure our community is a great place for all ages to live. It's interesting, as you hear some of the recommendations that we came up with, what we found, and this was fascinating to me, what works for 80-year-olds also works for 8-year-olds. There is so much commonality across the span of ages that almost every idea we came up with for an aging population works for the entire population. And the really interesting thing is that millennial generation, which is just behind the baby boomers, which is actually larger than the baby boomers, which is interesting, but their priorities in their lives almost to an item near what the aging population is asking for. You know, as a member of the baby boomers, we were really the ones who started the suburbs. We were the ones that said in the 50s, 60s, hey, let's go live out here where I can buy more house, I can get a bigger house for less money, and it's all brand new. I don't want to live in these old homes downtown. We're the ones that started that. But you know what's happening now? Just like with the millennials. We baby boomers are ready to come back downtown. We want to move back into the city where we can walk to get do our shopping, and we want to walk places, and we want to have our homes downtown where transportation is easy. As you all know, we don't have a lot of transportation out on the fringes. So the Age Friendly is really a program for all ages, adopting programs for safe, walkable streets, housing to allow affordable aging in place, attractive places, spaces, and transportation options, access to key services, and opportunities to participate in the community is really what Age Friendly is all about. The program had 8 committees, and we call them, ARP calls them domains, but there were 8 committees, and we had over 100 local citizens who participated on each of those 8 committees. Each committee came up with a recommendation of 3 to 5 goals and action steps, and those goals and action steps have just recently been combined into a city aging strategic plan. I was the facilitator of all those committees. I think I attended over 75 different meetings, as if I thought council was bad. Here are our 8 domains that we had separate committees on. There's transportation, housing, social participation, communication information, respect and social inclusion, civic participation, community support, and outdoor spaces. A committee for each domain. Each committee came up with 3 to 5 goals. And I just want to run through a few examples for you of some of the goals that these committees came up with. Transportation, access the need for vehicular transportation options on weekends and evenings. You'll hear our transit population talk about that's one of their greatest needs. And it's the same for the aging population. Our transit-dependent folks can't even get to jobs if the transit isn't running weekends and evenings, and the aging population feels the same way. Create a plan for uniform sidewalks and accessible paths of travel around bus stops. Aging population, if you're in a wheelchair or cane or have trouble walking, or have trouble getting to bus stops when the sidewalks aren't maintained or if it snows and the areas around bus stops aren't taken good care of. So those are a couple of recommendations. And housing, it was recommended that we create a home improvement and renovation package that a traditional homeowner, such as me, I own my own home, could hire somebody to come in and make my home more age-friendly. And we're hoping to work with some local developers to create these packages that would just make it easier for people to be able to stay in their own homes. Encourage the creation of innovative intergenerational housing opportunities. I guess I'm just tuned into this, but I've noticed lately that there are around the country, there are some housing opportunities where you have like college students living with older people, and the advantages that that brings for both groups. There's mentorship opportunities, there's opportunities to help each other, whether a young person can drive an older person someplace, but that it's really working well to have this intergenerational. We heard that a lot from all of these committees, was a desire to have more intergenerational activities in Colorado Springs. Social participation, we wanted to implement social center programming. Right now it's all, or senior center program, it's all at the senior center. And recently, a couple of years ago, when the city turned over the senior center to the YMCA's in town, what's happening is those senior center programs are now, just now, being started to be available to all the Ys around town. So we're spreading the programs out around the community. Develop and disseminate a how-to guide for business and organization interested in creating intergenerational programming. I think Innovations in Aging will actually work on creating a how-to book on how to create intergenerational programming for an organization. Communication, create a consortium to develop, implement a senior information portal. You know, one thing we found was we have all of the traditional senior services in Colorado Springs. The problem is they're scattered all over. And let's say my mother needed some help, I wouldn't even know where to begin. I wouldn't even know who to call. There's lots of important organizations here in town, but there's no single entry point. And so that came out loud and clear in these meetings, that we need a single entry point for services. You know, Silver Key now actually gets probably most of the calls because people are familiar with Silver Key. But is that the best entry point into a system of services? And develop a broader communication strategy, including age-friendly advertising. We just don't think we've done a very good idea or very good job of sharing the story of what it means to be an age-friendly city. Create a commission on aging. Colorado Springs is one of the only cities in the state, in large cities in the state and across the country, that does not have a commission on aging. So what is a commission on aging? We have one at the state level. There's a state commission on aging. But there is no group. Think of like the Parks Board or the TOPS Advisory Board or you guys as a community advisory board. You are a group whose job it is to advocate for issues, and we don't have that for our senior population in Colorado Springs. Commission on Aging would become an advocacy group for senior issues in Colorado Springs. So there would be a voice if issues arise around senior issues who could go to council or go to the mayor and advocate for senior issues. And we want to incentivize neighborhoods and HOAs to bring services hyperlocally or into their neighborhoods. Innovations in Aging is already working with the Old North End on what they call the iVillage model, where a neighborhood, actually, you would pay an annual fee, and they would hire a manager who would coordinate services within a neighborhood. So if I needed a light bulb changed and I couldn't, I am older, but if I was even older and needed help, I could call this manager within the neighborhood who would coordinate a handyman to come to my place. It also would allow for some mixing of transportation, so people in the neighborhood could sign up to volunteer to help with some transportation issues. This is just now happening in the Old North End, which will become the model that we hope we can then take from community to neighborhood across the city. Civic participation is create a centralized volunteer resource referral center. We used to have that in Colorado Springs, the nonprofit center here in town. If you were interested in volunteering, you could go to their website, put in what you're interested in, and what you might like to do, and they would search all the local nonprofits for volunteer opportunities. We no longer have that, and we heard loud and clear from a lot of the seniors in town that they would really like to find an easier way to get a source for volunteering. And as we know, those that we broke the aging population into 3 categories. You had the go group. I'd put myself in that, but some people might not. But I put in the go group, the slow go group, when you begin to slow down, and then there's the no go group. And those are sort of the 3 categories that we try to sort of keep in mind here. But the volunteer center, that go group, is really looking for things to do and to make it easier for them to find volunteer opportunities. And then develop a midterm-ship program, which is, did any of you see the movie The Intern? Sort of like that. The Pikes Peak Workforce Center is interested in helping us do this, and so is ad staff, actually, of creating they're not internships for young college students, they're midternships for older people who may have retired and may be looking to change careers or looking for something else to do for the next decade or so. And a midternship program would give them an opportunity to go in and work within an organization and hopefully maybe even lead to gainful employment. Community sport and health services increase participation in current community gardens in food desert areas particularly, and increase the awareness and strengthening of existing caregiver support. Tucker Hart Adams in a report talked about how we're going to put quite a strain on our caregiver support system as this bubble moves through, because we'll have so many. We're already seeing this with aging parents and people aging in the community. It's the caregivers that really need some support, and we need to do a better job of that. Outdoor spaces create a comprehensive list of parks with age-friendly and intergenerational utilization opportunities. There are parks around the country, and Nancy Lewis Park here in Colorado Springs is sort of like this. Normally you go to a park and you think if you see the swing sets and the jungle gyms, but there are some parks that have some facilities that are for the aging population so that they too can exercise, but it's at their level. And so trying to mix those together, and we've talked to our Parks Department, and they're real interested in helping us create these universal design parks that meet the needs of everybody in the community, not just kids, not just old people. Another thing in parks you really need is benches. You need some benches for people. Older people can't just stand, and put some benches around and let them sit in the parks. Create a uniform system for identifying trails as easy, medium, and difficult. Our park system is already working on that. It's kind of like you go skiing, you have, I'm not a skier, black diamond and yellow and green and blue. But doing that with our trails so that it's easy to identify. If you want to go take an easy hike, you're an older person, you're able to identify that. I have one more that I want to share, because this one Jonathan Liebert over at Better Business Bureau is always getting this one done. There is such a thing as a business designation as age-friendly. And it's like getting your Better Business Bureau sticker. You can get an age-friendly sticker, which means you've met certain criteria to meet an age-friendly standard. Now think about well, I know there's a couple restaurants in town. Whenever I go out to eat with a group of friends, they literally cannot read the menu because it's so dark in there. And you have a little candle on your table and nobody can see. And it's kind of funny with us all sitting around the table, nobody can see anything. Or if you're a retail store, you need to have places for people to sit. You know, older people just can't keep going for hours at a time. They need to sit. And some of those, lighting is a big part of the age-friendly designation. So we'll begin to see some of those age-friendly business designations around town. So of our 8 committees, we had several goals that were shared by multiple committees. Each committee was standalone, but in many cases they came up with some of the same ideas. First one is to create a city commission on Aging. The mayor has signed off on that. Now we take it to city council, and that'll be one of the first things that we do. A portal for services, a single entry point so that we can, you have a number you can call, everybody can get into the system. Age-friendly employer and business designations, intergenerational activities, marketing communication plan, portal for volunteering, and transportation needs. So those are the goals that we found commonality amongst all of the different committees. So here's some of our recommendations underway. Age-friendly representatives on the Public Committee for Comprehensive Plan. The city is doing a comprehensive replanning right now, and they have invited some representatives from the age-friendly community to participate. Parks has a grant, is working on an app for our parks and trails system. Transit fares already has 1/2 off for seniors. Did you know that? If you're a senior, you can ride transit for 1/2 off. And they have a wonderful ambassador program also where if you're not sure how to ride the bus, not sure how it works, they'll team you up with somebody who will show you the ropes of how to ride the bus. Senior program being implemented at the YMCA's, employer and business age-friendly designations, and the iVillage pilot program on the Old North End. Those are all parts of this plan that are already underway, which is pretty exciting. We are looking to raise some money to move this forward. It's not. It's going to take a village, so to speak, to get all of this done. We are determined that this will not be a plan that just sits on the shelf. The next job, and the plan itself is really fresh off the press. It was just finished last week. It now is being sent to ARP, who has to approve it for us to get our official age-friendly city designation. The next step is really for the Innovations in Aging Board to set priorities, to take the list of recommendations from the committees, pick 4 or 5 priorities, and then really focus on those over the next couple of years. And we are looking for some funding opportunities here. If anybody knows anybody, you just have to ask. So this is kind of age-friendly. It's where we are. It's been a real fun project for me to work on. I think it's an important one for our community, and I think it'll begin to really set us apart. You know, we have, from an economic perspective, I think it's important to recognize the economic value that retirees and older people bring to this community. You know, we have so many retired people here in Colorado Springs, and Dr. Tucker Hart-Adams even shared with us that the average mean income in Colorado Springs amongst retirees is $10,000 higher than the average retiree. So we're very fortunate to have that relationship with the military, which actually is another boost to our local economy. So, you know, for business people, I think it's important that they be aware that this is happening, and you'll begin to see signs all around you of this bubble beginning to move through our society and our city, and Innovations in Aging hopes to address all of that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Are you want to answer any questions?
Any questions? I'm more than glad to.
Yeah, looking at the PPACG, they've also got an area agency on aging.
Yes.
And all of those that you articulated, all the agencies that are there, what's the integration? Because every one of them's got a plan.
You're right.
You got a plan, you got goals, they've got goals. How are they all coming together so there's, no duplication?
No, that's a great question. And we, the Area Agency on Aging participated in almost all of our domains. So they were a part of this. Silver Key was a part of this. Everybody, all the agencies that I'm aware of in the city were working together to create this plan so that there isn't a duplication. But what you described is exactly what it is. There's different organizations all over town that each provide different services. And so finding a way to make it easy for people to get into that system and then share services is really going to be an important part of this, I
So
think.
do you see yourself as a capstone organization?
I don't see Innovations in Aging playing that role, but I think that's one of the first priorities they will tackle is who is, and what's that going to look like to have that entry point, which is probably could be as simple as we have 211 in town, which United Way does, which is a phone number you can call for services. Right now, if you call and they ask you how old you are and you say you're over 65, they give you Silver Key's number to call. So if we want something like that to become our entry point, it's going to take some work and probably some manpower to make that happen.
How much input did you receive from organizations outside of the city limits?
We didn't, and I'll tell you why. We really see this as a plan for the region, but this is a city initiative.
Pardon?
It's a city initiative. It was signed off by the mayor. ARP is doing it city by city. So we didn't reach out beyond the city of Colorado Springs. We hope to take this plan, we haven't done it yet, to the county commissioners, because we would love for them to join with us in supporting some of the goals.
Well, you have a higher per capita senior population in the county than you do in the city. And some very, very active organizations out in the county that are continually struggling for funding sources.
Yeah.
We operate at the Fountain Valley Senior Center. We have an organization called Seniors First. Their job is volunteers, and they help navigate through all of the different organizations.
Right.
Created a one-stop shop. We've been looking for funding for that for 5 years. It simply doesn't exist. But we've been able to help thousands of our citizens get through some of the red tape to get some of the services they need. Sometimes it's as small as finding somebody to cut down a tree for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Build a ramp, those types of things. And we spend an awful lot of man-hours in helping our seniors discounted, in some cases free, with some of our nonprofit organizations.
You know, one thing we're really good at here, in most cities, because we've looked at cities all over the country who have age-friendly designations, in most cities, Denver included, it comes from within the government. There is a aging office within the government. At Denver, their aging person in the city of Denver is the one that managed this process and who you would look to. In Colorado Springs, we have always done things differently. We don't look to the government to provide these services. We look to our local nonprofits and groups, and that's where this is sprung from and how it will move forward, is we will look for ways to collaborate together to actually meet the needs of some of this plan.
Jen, I think there are so many, in this group, we have so many people that represent smaller governments and smaller organizations that, you know, I'm sure everyone's going to be interested in what the expansion progress is.
Sure.
So, we have a few more?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Jan, I was a little disappointed that the information referral service of United Way 211 is not active in referring seniors to their services that they need. I thought that was going to be an umbrella for information and referral.
I was surprised too, and it was one that came up in many of our committee meetings as a suggestion of that entry point into the system. And the people I spoke to told me that that just isn't the case, that they do refer people to Silver Key. That's what they tell people, is just go to Silver Key. And Silver Key, by default, has sort of become that agency that helps people navigate the system.
It would be interesting if your organization were to sit down with somebody with the United Way board and talk through that issue, I think.
It's very possible that they could become that entry point. Again, though, it's going to take probably some resources. But I think it's very possible, as we begin to work on this, of where that entry point. But they definitely need to be a part of it. You know, the city is doing a 311. It's not in place yet, but they're working on creating a 311, which is an information site for city things, so that you can call 311 and they'll answer any question you have related to the city. So, a couple of options there. Jens?
You talked about North End being a community. What other community components do you have within the city that you would call like North End? Would you be looking at subdivisions like Briargate or?
You think of, we sort of think of Kono and how they've divided the city into neighborhoods, like you have, what's over by Patty Jewett? What's over by Patty Jewett? Patty Jewett's over by Patty Jewett. But like the Patty Jewett neighborhood, and just the way Kono divides the city. We sort of think of it that way.
So you would separate, isolate each one of
Yes,
those?
yes, so that the services become hyper-local, that the neighbors right within that neighborhood actually work together and help each other. And you would pay an annual fee and hire somebody to sort of coordinate all that within the neighborhood. So there'd be one person. If just volunteers try to do it, I think it might be hard to actually provide the kinds of services you want.
Okay, we'll take one more question if there is. Yep, Kevin.
And in the review of other cities, or even in your own ideas, what kind of things from a technology standpoint are changing the way cities interact with their communities?
Do you know, it's funny, we did a survey actually, because we have sort of, and it is a misnomer, that seniors don't use computers. Well, the truth is, the majority of people we surveyed said that they did get their information through computers. And granted, there's a group that don't, and they don't use computers, so that's part of the communication problem, is you've got kind of both extremes of this. But there certainly are some things from a technology perspective that I think we'll be able to do. We haven't really come up with them yet, other than some app ideas of different apps like the Parks and Trails app and some things like that.
How about Pokemon Hold?
Pokemon Old. Now, how fun would that be? Run around, get them all over town, right? Looking at different ideas.
Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing the progress.
Everybody, thank you, and glad to give you an update anytime.
Okay, let's move on with the agenda. We'll go back. The 2017-2022 TIP amendment. All right, Kevin, welcome back.
Thank you. Again, my name is Kevin. I'm the transportation planner here at PPACG. So I'm going to talk about two amendments that we have today regarding the TIP. So the first amendment is Amendment 1, and Amendment 1 has two different parts to it. So the first part is the federal funding pool changes. So the FAST Act, which was passed in December of last year, gave new federal funding amounts to all the states, and CDOT recently gave us their new funding totals. And so the numbers that you guys have on your memo shows the new federal funding amount that we have for CMAQ, TAP, and STP Metro. So if you look in the left side, you have the new funding amount, and in the middle you have the old funding amount, and on the right you have the net change. So as you can see, CMAQ received additional money, TAP received less money, and STP Metro received less money in fiscal year 2018. So these numbers are from CDOT. So in Amendment 2, we're going to have to go over these numbers because we received less money in some categories. We had to move some projects around into different funding categories to keep the TIP fiscally constrained. So we're going to talk about that more in Amendment 2. So that's the first part of Amendment 1. The second part of Amendment 1 comes from Mountain Metro Transit. They have a new scope change request for Route 6. And I don't know if, Brian, would you want to speak on this? Sure. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit. The request that we're tagging on to for Amendment 1 involves rescoping a previously programmed TE project that we received funding for a few years ago. It entails, currently, Route 6 is in blue here. It operates from the Nevada corridor here on the left side of the page, and it goes to the Citadel Mall. Currently, we operate on El Paso, 4th Street, and Hancock. We wish to operate on Fillmore. There are a lot more ridership generators on Fillmore. There's more commercial activity. We do carry some riders on this stretch of 4th Street, but those bus stops are just over a quarter mile from Fillmore. So it's well within our service standards for walking to a bus stop. So we wanted to make this change before we finalize this project. You know, we would hate to, even though the city could benefit from having improved sidewalks up on 4th Street, the intent of the TE grant we received was to improve bus stops along our transit routes. And we'd rather wish to operate on Fillmore, where there's more ridership potential. So that's the request. There's no change in funding. It's just a scope change. And we're doing this concurrently. We're working with the Federal Transit Administration to get a categorical exclusion to make this change. So we're doing this process concurrently with FTA's review of the CADEX. And the TAC approved it last month, and now we're here for your approval. And we'll go to the board in August for approval and then finalize this. And we won't make the routing change until all the improvements are done.
I have a quick question, because, of course, what we got was black and white, so we didn't
Right,
see
right.
the red and blue changes. But is it correct that you'll be eliminating the red and just hanging with the blue?
Yes. This map, this is an older map. Prior to May 1st of this year,
Right.
it operated from the downtown terminal all the way up Wasatch.
Yep.
And so that segment was eliminated with our spring schedule change or service change. So right now, the route just operates in blue, but we are doing that spot up on El Paso, 4th and Hancock.
And the goal is to increase volume.
Yes, yeah, and there's just so much more along Fillmore,
Oh, yeah.
but the pedestrian environment is horrible. There's really nothing there. So.
Okay, any other questions, Brian? Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question. You mentioned that you can do this with the existing funding, but that Fillmore corridor is, in all honesty, a mess. When you look at the improvements that are going to be made, where are we moving the funding from to accommodate bus stops and other things that you'll need to be able to allow pedestrians easier access on the Fillmore? It's like an expensive project.
It's not. It does seem like it, but it's not really that much more expensive. The funding that we received a couple of years ago through the TE grant is mostly enough to do this change. We did apply through CDOT's Region 2 TAP program for additional funding, but it's only a marginal amount more. So yeah, there is a lot of right-of-way easement and some acquisition that may be needed, but it's our cost estimates show it as not being very much more expensive than the funding we have.
And so the funding that was allocated for other projects, are you going to have a idea of what the projects are that are not going to be completed?
No. This is no other projects are not receiving funding because of this. We're using our funding to improve the 4th Street section,
Okay.
but instead we're going to put it on the Fillmore.
Okay.
So no other projects are being unfunded. Right.
And then, has there been a traffic impact study? Fillmore is a very tight street at this point, and so has there been a traffic impact of moving buses? Is that?
No, we don't have to do that, but our engineering review and costs indicate that it's all within budget.
I don't want to ask a question of Brian, so if there are more questions, I have another question on CMAQ.
Okay, we'll get back to it, and Kevin will be able to finish up. Okay, any other questions for Brian? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there, can you give us kind of a macro look at CMAQ funds in the state of Colorado and why we ended up losing dollars over the period of time while others gained? Can you kind of pull it all together? Craig?
I think I'll let Craig answer that one.
I remember you saying that CMAQ funds are going to disappear.
Yes.
What's the cause of that?
Well, the cause of CMAQ funding disappearing is our air quality issue is carbon monoxide, and we have not had a carbon monoxide problem in over 25 years. In 2019, October 1st, 2018, we will exit maintenance, and so we won't be eligible for CMAQ funding anymore. The reason that we've had reduced funding is because the State Transportation Commission, our CMAQ funds are passed through the CDOT, and the Transportation Commission decided to focus on ozone. We don't have an ozone problem. Probably next month, I'm guessing, Pete will come back and tell you that we don't have an ozone problem. And so we lost a couple $1 million a year to the Denver area at that point. Actually, Dr. Cog is fighting for us to keep being eligible for CMAQ for us because we don't actually get it, they do. So they're fighting a battle for us. It's awesome. Yep.
Okay, so you guys have any additional questions on Amendment 1?
The question I had, and maybe it's too specific, it just seems like in a overview level that we did fine, we did okay with the transportation stuff, I mean, net-wise, but it seems like the things that had to do with non-transportation alternatives, like trails and that kind of stuff, was kind of the loser in all of this. Does that seem accurate?
Are you saying for the new funding amounts that we got?
Or did you just change buckets?
Yeah, so for the next amendment, we're going to go over that. None of the projects lost money. We just had to move them around into different funding categories to make it work. So that's Amendment 2. So, yeah.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Did it just move around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had to make a few changes to keep it fiscally constrained. So.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, that was Amendment 1. We got the new funding totals from the FAST Act. So now we'll move on to Amendment 2. Amendment 2 also has two parts to it. The first part is actually slightly off topic from the FAST changes. It comes from the Federal Highway Administration. So the Federal Highway Administration has given us some new rules of how they want us to show money that has not been obligated in the TIP. So basically what they want is for us to show in the TIP projects that have not been finished yet. So between 2011 and 2015, there were several projects that have gone through, a lot of them have gone through the design phase, but a lot of them have not finished construction yet. And so the Federal Highway Administration has asked us to continue to show these projects in the TIP because they have basically not been finished. So if you were to look at, actually I think I can do it from here. Let's see here. So if you guys have this this attachment here, I think it's attachment number 3. So this list shows which projects we had to show in the TIP that were unobligated. Yeah. So for example, if you look at the Rainbow Falls access, if you go under the column that says total of transaction, you'll see that it has $276,000 of federal unobligated money and $69,000 of federal, $69,000 local unobligated money. So this is just one example of what we had to show in the TIP document. So in essence, this is not additional money added to the TIP. This is just money from previous TIPs that we have to show in this TIP. So that's really all this is. This is a new a new guideline from the Federal Highway Administration. So in your attachment number 2, that's the full TIP document. The projects that this applies to are all highlighted in yellow, and this is all added to those projects in the full TIP document. If you print it out in black and white, it's probably going to be in a darker shade. But this list, if you can probably just refer to the attachment 3, that would probably be sufficient for you. So that's the first part of amendment number 2. So now we'll go to the second part. So the second part goes back to what we discussed in amendment number 1 with the new FAST numbers that we got from CDOT. We had to kind of move some projects around in the TIP to keep it fiscally constrained. So let's see here. So the attachment number 4 that you guys have is a letter from CDOT. This letter just explains everything that we moved around and exactly why we did it. I'm going to go over that real fast with you, but that's basically the gist of the letter that we got. Okay. So I'm going to go over exactly what we moved around and why we did it. So in your memo, the first bullet point, it talks about how TAP in fiscal year 2018 and 2019 had a shortfall. So what we had to do to keep TAP fiscally constrained for those years is we had to move Mountain Metro Route 9 and Route 8. We had to split that between TAP and CMAQ. So if you look at attachment number 5 that you guys have, it's this one right here on the screen. I can zoom in here. So this is an example of what we did. So here we have, it says old numbers right here. It says Route 9 Phase 4. So this is what it was before we got the fast numbers. We had all of the money in STBG. That is the same. STBG is the same as TAP. But we had all the money in that category, $428,000. So what we did to keep it fiscally constrained is, if you go to the top, we moved some of that money into CMAQ. So we just split it. We did the same exact thing with Route 8 as well. So we have Route 8 here. All the money's in STBG. So we split that between CMAQ and STBG, with, again, the same as TAP. So that's the first change that we did. Hopefully this is clear to you guys so far.
Clear as mud. Oh, yeah.
Perfect. The next change we did is the second bullet point in the memo. The second bullet point, excuse me, we actually are still leaving this open until we get bids on it. So the second bullet point is nothing's actually changed with that. We're still working on that. That's going to be in the next amendment, number 3. So you can just ignore that one for now. So in your memo, you have under number 2, it has different bullet points like that. Yeah, I'm always referring back to the memo. I apologize. To keep us on track here. You find it? Okay. So in the memo, the third bullet point down, what we did was we found that CMAQ had a surplus of federal money, and we also found that STP Metro was programmed in fiscal year 2017. So what we did to keep that fiscally constrained was we also moved the Colorado Springs traffic systems upgrade into CMAQ. So you can see that in attachment number 6. I can also show it on the screen here. So I'll show you exactly what we did. So here's the old numbers. We have traffic system upgrades, STP Metro. All the money is in there before we got the fast numbers. When we did receive the new numbers, we split it between STP Metro and CMAQ. So that's basically what we did with traffic system upgrades. Again, this is also shown in the full TIP document, attachment number 2. It's highlighted in yellow, the changes there as well. And then, let's see here.
Yeah.
So the next thing that we changed, we found actually that several projects were not in the TIP. It was an error. We had a transition between me and the transportation planner before. There was a miscommunication, and so some of these projects were just omitted. And so what we did is we added them back into the TIP, but it still keeps the TIP fiscally constrained. So these projects that we added in are in your attachment number 7. Also show it on the screen here as well. So the projects that we added include State Highway 21 widening, US 24 West improvements, Woodman Road, and Baptist Road. And so, again, on this attachment number 7, you can see the highlighted numbers are the ones that we added back into the TIP.
Those 4 projects are actually in there.
Those are actually in. So if you were to look at your attachment number 2, the full TIP, they would be in there and they would be highlighted in yellow as well. And then the last change that we did is the 31st Street Bridge over Camp Creek Road replacement. There's not an attachment to this one, but basically this one was omitted in error as well. And so we put that back in. It's in STP Metro. That's where that one is located. So we made quite a few changes. So I think I covered it all. Do you guys have any questions at this point? Hopefully that was clear for you guys.
Attachment 7, where were the projects before they were inserted in here? Were they approved, or did they just,
They weren't on the priority.
were they generated from someplace, or where did they come from?
I believe that they were approved, right?
They were approved, they got left out by accident, and we're just putting them back in where they were before. So they all went through the competitive process, they went through the selection process, they were in there, they got lost, they're now found.
We actually, this is a deja vu. We have already gone through this discussion because the projects were omitted and I believe it was some type of priority list. We thought they were back in, but apparently they didn't get back in. So now they're like really in. So,
They should definitely be in this time, yeah.
I looked at that list and I went, okay, we've talked about this before. So,
Okay. Yeah, they're definitely in the tip, in the full document, so.
that's good because they're happening, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Kevin? Okay, can I have a motion to approve? Go ahead, Ellen.
I make a motion that we approve as submitted.
Both amendments, 1 and 2?
Yes, 1 and 2.
Okay, could I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, Jennifer? I admire the way we move money to make things actually get done, so.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Valentine, PPACG. Hopefully this will be a little reprieve from brain damage. They gave me the easy item today. So this is proposed amendment number 1 to the 2016-2017 UPWP. So just a little bit of background. Per federal transportation planning regulations, PPACG is required to maintain a unified planning work program, which basically just describes the transportation planning work that's going to occur in the region over the next couple of years. The board did approve our current UPWP in August of last year, but we typically like to do a mid-cycle update. So it's been about a year since the UPWP was approved, and so we like to get some additional information from our member entities just to make sure we have the most current information in there. So in June, we took this same item to the TAC as an information item, and we also requested some information from them about what I just described, so more current information about what they're doing for projects. Last week, we took it back to the TAC as this review and recommend item, and they did recommend it to the board for approval. What else? Oh, so we received a couple of minor edits and changes from the TAC last week that we're making now. Obviously, they're not in your packet, but they're just typos and things like that. But then there were 2 other things I wanted to mention. The first is, I guess we can scroll down. So on page 40, I'll get there eventually. Where's the thing? Well, anyway, I'll let you look. So on page 40, Mountain Metro Transit bumped one of their items, a follow-up analysis from 2016 to 2017 with no additional changes in the scope or budget. And then they added one item to their list of projects to be completed in 2017, and that was a fare analysis and simplification study. Thank you, Anna, for continuing to scroll. So then the last thing was we did receive some additional information from the City of Manitou Springs. So basically, if we didn't get information from the member entities, we just left what we had in there and assumed that it was the same, that they didn't have any updates. And then there are some people who never gave us any information, and so it's just not in there. This is essentially a document between us and CDOT, so it's nice to have as much information in there as we can have. But we did get a nice list from Manitou Springs that lives in my document, but not in here yet.
And it'll be included then?
For the board.
Okay. So it won't be in what we review and recommend, but it will be in the boards.
Yeah, I think that's right. I
Are
mean,
there any substantive?
no, I mean, these are all things that have been out there. We just didn't actually have the list from them for the UPWP. It's not, there are no new projects. They're all things that have been floating around. We just didn't have text from them to put in this document.
All right. Do you have any questions for Jennifer? Go ahead, Vince.
Do you have any administrative authority to make these changes and just provide this to us for information? Or any dollar change requires our approval?
Oh, yeah, no, there aren't funding changes or anything like that. It's
Do
just,
you have the ability to administratively make that change without bringing it to us, maybe just giving us information? Because it says review and recommend approval.
oh, you mean adding the projects for Manitou Springs?
Any levels, they do in the tip. They have administrative approvals to make changes. Do you have administrative ability to do this with the UPWP?
I'm not sure. No? Craig says no.
So any minor change whatsoever has to come to us.
There's no requirement that anything comes to us. We're simply an advisory board.
It says review and recommend.
Yeah, I know that's what they ask, but.
Okay. Because we approved it a year and a half ago before it went to the PPACG board.
Oh, I see.
So you're making an amendment. Does it need to even come to us? Or just provide it as information?
I think Craig is saying it needs to come to you, but I believe we would bring it to you anyway as a courtesy, if nothing else.
We have to adopt a new UPWP for contractual purposes with CDOT, so the board has to adopt that. And the board has said that before they adopt anything like this, they would like both advisory committees to weigh in. So from Federal Highway's perspective, no, we don't have to bring it to you. From our board of directors' perspective, yes, we have to bring it to you. Does that help? Okay.
Yes, and I'd have to say I do appreciate it, particularly if there are any changes that any constituents want to be aware of.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Yes, go ahead.
What's what's the distribution of this document?
I'm not sure, actually. I believe it's publicly available. Is the UPWP publicly available?
It should be on our website.
Okay.
I noticed in the list of definitions in the back, you call it something else, but FAST is not included.
Oh, okay. We can certainly add that.
And I found that the acronym ICE-T, for example, was followed by the year that it was passed, 1991, and none of the other surface transportation acts were dated. That was helpful for me to kind of put them in perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the main changes we made in the text since FAST was approved between the time that the UPWP was approved, mid-cycle amendment was to change some of the MAP 21 to say FAST. So I think that's a great suggestion.
Those are good. Thanks, John. Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
On page 5, I was looking at some of the factors for MAP 21 FAST, and I had a couple of questions. On number 6, it was enhance the integration and connectivity of the transportation system across and between modes. So has there been discussions then with folks like Fountain Metro to be able to share rides and those types of things in order to bring the county into places in the county into the transportation corridor, or is it, again, going to be just city-centric?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. Then there's, and I had another question, but I'll just jump to 10, reduce or mitigate stormwater impacts of surface transportation. So then, does that mean that funding will be spent through MAP 21 and FAST on stormwater projects?
I think a lot of what we do in terms of stormwater is, so for example, in our long-range plan, that's something that we address. But then the actual teeth and the regulations and the checks are actually at the local level usually, because they're the ones who, are doing the projects and have the requirements for different types of stormwater mitigation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I guess I would see it in, like, route improvements or drainage improvements, if we're putting in bus stops or transportation corridors, making sure we watch drainage and those types of things. Is that a safe assumption?
Well, and it's also a requirement, or it's part of how we score projects as part of the long-range plan, which, essentially gets carried over into the TIP, because we would hope that in the future the TIP projects would come from the long-range plan. So it is something that gets considered when we're weighting and scoring projects that make that list.
Okay, thank you.
Scott, would you mind when you speak, just moving the microphone a little closer? You have a very soft voice. Thank you.
You're certainly welcome.
Thanks so much. Okay, may I have a motion to approve? So moved. Okay, a second, please. Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, Ken.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Prather, Transportation Planner here at PPACG. This is an information item that will be coming back to you next month and probably September also for further discussion and a final recommendation. So this is just an introduction to some new changes as a result of the FAST Act that we've been talking about. It did two things concerning freight. One was to create a new funding program for freight corridors that will result in state of Colorado receiving about $15 million, that's $15 million more a year for improvements to freight corridors. It also did away with the old national freight corridor system and created a new one called the National Highway Freight Network. And in your memo, there's 4 bullets on the first page that identify the 4 components of the new freight network. The first bullet, the primary highway freight system, and the FAST Act defined portions of the national interstate system as the primary freight network. So that has already been identified in our region, I-25. That's the only road in our region that's on the national freight system now, and it's part of the primary highway freight system. And then by definition, the 4th bullet there, the rest of the interstate system will be part of the national freight corridor system. So that leaves the 2 bullets in between, the critical rural freight system and the critical urban freight system that still need to be designated. CDOT will be designating the critical rural freight system. Their goal is to have that designated in October. And so it and the urban freight system, can be included in a national designation by USDOT on December 4th as part of the to-be-approved national multimodal freight system. So anyway, that's the goal. It's not a legal goal. It's not a legal deadline, but it's a timeline goal that we're trying to shoot for to finish this project. The urban freight system is where it gets a little tricky. Both CDOT and PPACG will be designating roads on the critical urban freight system. For freight corridors within an urbanized area, an MPO area greater than 500,000, and that's only us and Dr. Cog, we, the MPO, will designate the corridors. In urbanized areas smaller than 500,000, CDOT will be designating the area in consultation with the smaller MPOs, and when we designate our portion, we have to do it in consultation with CDOT. The tricky part of all of this is that Colorado is only allowed to designate 80.35 center lane miles of road. So
We can designate something, DRCOG can designate something, CDOT can designate something, but it all has to add up to no more than 80.35.
Great.
So there is a lot of discussion and coordination that still has to occur between those three entities to designate this critical urban freight system.
Ken, is that 80 miles specific to urban? You said it doesn't really have to do with the rural?
Right. This is inside the census-designated urbanized area. For the rural, it's 160 point something. I think it's in one of the handouts there that's attached.
Where do those numbers come from?
Yeah, it's magic.
They're designated in the law.
Really?
Makes sense.
And it's, you know, formula-driven and based. And, so, yeah, and with 80 miles in urban, 160 miles in rural, and you've only got $15 million statewide to do anything with it. So there hasn't even yet been any discussion as to, once these corridors are designated, what projects will be funded, how will CDOT, and I can't imagine the Transportation Commission splitting the money up amongst all of the regions of the state. So it's going to be, how do you select projects on a statewide basis for these freight corridors once they've been identified, and I'm sure that'll be a CDOT process, but we'll be feeding into it with the designation of the corridors and identifying what's critical freight corridors in our area. And they don't have to be a full corridor. It doesn't have to be all of Powers Boulevard. It could be just an intersection on Powers Boulevard.
Ken, we have a few questions. Are you ready
Certainly.
to take a few questions?
I would just like to know, just looking at our little map here, how many total critical freight corridor miles we have, if you think them all up?
We have none at this point. And I don't know how many miles of center lane miles that we have in our, of roads. It has to be, any public road is eligible to be designated. But on page, on attachment 2, it's the third page of attachment 2, just before the maps. At the top of the page, it's underlined, it says critical urban freight corridors. Then it says criteria. There's 4 sub-bullets there that for a corridor to be designated as a critical urban corridor, it must meet the requirements of one of those bullets.
So Ken, is the information that you use, is what you would come back and recommend, or what PPACG would come back and recommend? Would those be based on research of the amount of transports that are currently used on those particular roadways then?
That could be certainly be part of it. It must benefit freight. So if you don't have trucks or freight on a road, it's going to be hard to justify spending the money.
That makes sense.
Off the top of their head, at the TAC meeting, the local entities identified several projects, and that might help, you know, what you're questioning. So right off the top of their head, you know, is the Powers and Research intersection. It's being changed from an intersection to an interchange on what's going to be an interstate. The Powers and North Carefree and Constitution intersections that converted to a continuous flow intersection. US 24 West from 8th to Manitou, safety and capacity improvements, including left turn lanes at 21st and 31st, possibly widening. US 24 East from Powers Boulevard out to Falcon in the Woodman Road area. Potential capacity improvements per the study that's just now being initiated on Highway 24 as to how to improve safety and the capacity on that road. But from a county's perspective, from a rural setting, especially the Garrett Road to Falcon Highway portion, of that. And then they're also very interested in the Charter Oak Ranch Road down at the, leading into Fort Carson down in Fountain. So those are the projects that just came off the top of people's heads. And we will have to come up with, how is it that we want, what is our own internal criteria or methodology for designating these roads? We haven't developed that yet.
But you'll do that based on research then?
That's what we have to decide. Do we just take off the top of the head, or do we do some research? Do we say that it has to have a minimum traffic of X percent trucks? Or, you know, what? There's just some very general federal guidelines and requirements that have to be met, and that's what we have to now develop over the next couple of months is how do we develop, how should we, what should we consider in developing it? And so that's where you come in. What's important to you about freight? And
Okay, Scott had a quick question?
I want to make sure that I'm clear on the funding sources, because the MAP 21 and FAST kind of grew over the last few years. So this isn't brand-new money that's available to the states. This is a
Yes, it
carve-out.
is.
This is brand-new money.
Brand new money.
This is not a carve-out of other funding that was coming that now just has more restrictions on it than it did before at the federal level. This is brand-new money. We've never seen this money before.
It's a brand-new funding category. Now, how they carved it out of whatever funding categories existed
Yeah,
under
we
MAP
have-
21.
We have less discretionary funding now and more restricted funding as a piece of that. And
Probably-
so the federal government is making us justify the use of money at the state level.
That's probably true, yeah. And it'd be 15 million a year approximately.
It's not a
and-
huge number, but it's one of those things that tends to grow. We tend to increase the restrictions on the money instead of remove them.
So-
we
so
take away
thi-
the local control.
So this money now must be spent for freight projects only.
Right.
Okay, Bob had a question, then we'll get back to Hannah.
As you were discussing the four things that were thrown out at the TAC meeting, I guess I was taken back by, you know, if you put those four projects together, you'd probably use up the whole state's allocation of $15 million.
For the next decade.
First come, first serve. No, that's why we do have to have the coordination with the rest of the state and with DRCOG, because we can't go over the 80 miles. And then there's only the $15 million statewide for the entire state for both rural and urban. The idea that has been discussed so far and at the state level, and their approach is to identify not an entire corridor, but to identify just specific project areas that we already know need to be done, because this can be redesignated at any time. So as soon as that project is finished, we could take that quarter-mile, half-mile section of road off the system, put it on something else, and then that other area would be eligible for this funding. It's not a guarantee they'll get any funding, because there's still only 15 million. But if, for priority projects, you know, it's an extra, as long as it meets the criteria for freight, maybe it's an extra money that can be applied to priority areas.
Hannah?
Yeah, I was just curious, since this came out of the FAST Act, which required a strategic plan for freight, do we have a freight plan, a strategic plan for freight here? That's what's helpful to identify that here.
There is a statewide freight plan, and we have a chapter in our 2040 regional transportation plan that talks about freight.
And then also, just on, this is in the, are there other, it seems like there are a lot of grants that people are looking for additional funding that, you know, Columbus with their infrastructure transit, some of that came out of it as well. So is there potential for additional grant funding on top of what's that 15 million that could be grant awarded?
Correct. I mean, certainly for people looking for funding for a project, if it's eligible as a freight corridor, they could apply for this funding. They could apply for SDP Metro funding, which is a general purpose funding. They could apply, well, we want to put bike lanes on there, we can use some TAP funds as well. So as small as the pots are getting, as Mr. Turner has indicated, you know, you really got to cobble a lot of sources together. There's no longer one large source that can pay for everything.
So what we'll look from you next time then will be probably either some criteria or some narrowing of what you all have discovered then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Vince?
The money, the 15 million is for the interstates and the 80 miles, or just the 80 miles?
Yes, both.
Oh, so interstate.
It can be used on the existing interstate system. It can be used on, and the new urban and rural roads that we designate, the additional 80 and 160, you know, it's still got to be spread across those as well as the existing interstate system.
So do you have needs on the interstate system in our regions that, obviously?
In I-25, I think we got one or two.
You could suck that up in a
$15
second.
million, it's just, I mean, it's a tiny amount of money. It's 15 lane miles. It's not, you know, we're not really talking about a whole lot of money here.
Okay, Kevin, you have a question?
That's an observation on the map, that has Colorado Springs on it. The Colorado Boulevard is kind of end out somewhere, I'm not sure where, I think it's about the bottom.
Yeah.
And it seems odd that you don't have, doesn't even go to the airport. And you don't have any connection between Colorado and I-25. So, I don't know what this map is going to do.
Goes to show.
I think we ought to try to make connections.
Yeah, what this map, if I'm not sure which map you're
Colorado Freight Corridor, the fleet project area is good. And then it has the Colorado Springs area. Doesn't have a page designation.
At the north there, it shows that power is stopping at State Highway 83. And then down at the south, what they have it highlighted for is the percent trucks.
It's just kind of a data map, not a planning map.
Right, this is just an information map, and what they were really trying to show there is the urban area. All of that shaded area is the urban area. And so what we will be talking about will be inside the urbanized area. Anything outside the urbanized area will be is defined as rural, and CDOT will be making the designation there. And I don't want to muddy the water, but
Okay, well,
CDOT got the shaded part wrong, so.
okay, last question.
Ken, clarification question. It says 80 miles, center line miles, and that means either whether it's 1 lane, 2 lane, 3 lanes, or 4 lanes?
Correct.
And so in that aspect, when they're looking at putting that into play, since that has traffic volume, do they take the number of lanes into account as well as those miles?
In the volumes that they have here, yes, they did.
Okay. And the other thing is that with recently, a couple of years ago, the neighborhoods and a bunch of other entities worked with the city of Colorado Springs for a truck route corridor. And will things like that be used to help identify what sections should be part of this 80 miles?
That could certainly be part of what we use to make that designation, yes.
Okay, we'll look for an update next month then, and perhaps about criteria, a little bit more information about what you all are planning to use.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Go ahead.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County, on the TAC. So we decided that we already spent our allocation of the money in the discussion that we had at our TAC meeting because this amount of money is so small. So we said, okay, let's just, instead of doing a bunch of research, instead of coming up with a bunch of criteria, let's take a look at some projects that we have going on in the area that we know are going to need some funding, that we need another avenue to grab some money at. And we picked some of those projects. So those are the projects that Ken rattled off to you. And that's why we focused on that project-based approach. Tiny amount of money, a lot of brain damage. We didn't want to go through it. We needed to find another place to grab some money, so that was the approach that we took. We hope you follow us on that approach next month because we probably will continue to go through it. We recognize we're fighting with DRCOG tooth and nail for every one of these dollars out there. So we want to make sure that we put a small number of road miles in with our big projects to ensure that they move forward. That was our approach. Any questions? Okay.
Does make sense.
Okay, I think we have, is it Craig?
Good afternoon, Craig Casper, Transportation Director, and this is actually going to be a tag team between me and Rob because this is a two-part item. The two parts are the 10-year development list, which is CDOT has put together a long list of projects that could be funded if money fell out of the sky. And then they decided, well, but that's such a big list, let's put together a smaller priority list of projects that we would fund if money fell out of the sky. Our board, attachment 3, is a subset of the list of projects that our board in November said these are priority projects. The subset you see are the ones that are on the National Highway System. You'll see it totals about $310 million. In CDOT's 10-year list, I think we have about $160 million. And in CDOT's priority list, we have about we have about $310 million in the big list and about $165 million in the smaller list. The projects that are in the list, there are 5 projects, and let me get it's page 3. The 5 projects that are in our Tier 1, the smaller list, are US 20, and these are not in any particular order. These are just US 24 West, I-25 to Woodland Park, doing drainage and intersection improvements and some resurfacing. I-25 north, the PEL, that's putting some money into the project from milepost 160 in our region up to milepost 180 in Dr. Cog's area on I-25. Actually, here, let me go here, if this will work. So just to show, it'd be this area in our, so about from parallel to Higbee Road on I-25 in our area up to the El Paso County line. That's the section of I-25 widening that's in our region, but the widening goes all the way up to the south end of Castle Rock up here. Somewhere in this, I don't know exactly where it ends, so I just made a big block. Somewhere in here is where the project ends. So that we would fund, put some money into for that portion of the project.
Michelle says it's mile marker 178.
Is it? Okay. I-25 widening South Academy. So that is this area of I-25 from South Academy up to Lake Circle, doing an ad lane project there. Powers Boulevard, State Highway 21, making some interim intersection improvements on the central part. It's up here, basically between Constitution and North Circle. And Powers Boulevard, Research Parkway, putting an interchange in here because we have interchanges along the route, and then we have an at-grade, then we have another interchange. And so this intersection is inordinately congested. So that would create actually a nice section of freeway. So those are the projects that CDOT has, with our coordination, tentatively put in our priority 1. Rob, would you like to add more information?
You did a pretty good job summarizing, but I'll try. So I'm Rob Fry with CDOT Region 2 Environmental and Planning. So a little more background on this list. There's CDOT has this development program list. It encompasses $8.5 billion worth of projects that are unfunded that are needed across the system statewide. And as Craig mentioned, we obviously don't have $8.5 billion. We don't even have $2.5 billion, which is what this new 10-year list, smaller group of projects is. But we need to have some sort of project priority list, so if and when money does become available, we have a list to pull from. And so one of the things we've heard in the past is CDOT has too doggone many lists. So this is our effort to try to consolidate that list into one priority list that we can go to. of that $2.5 billion, and again, this is kind of like monopoly money. It doesn't exist yet. Region 2 has an allocation of $477 million, so that's 19% across the state, and that's based on a historical average of TAP, RPP, and faster money. So that's how that figure came about. Craig did go over the 5 projects that we identified as our Tier 1 group. We also have 3 additional projects on the Tier, I'm not sure I said it right. We have 5 projects on the Tier 1 list, so that would be your priorities. And then we have 3 additional projects that are on the Tier 2 list. One comment that we heard from from PPACG is we don't have all of our NEPA cleared projects on that list, so we will be adding those as well, but I don't think any of those have arisen to a Tier 1 priority yet. So really what I'm looking for is, have we missed anything on that Tier 1 priority list?
You've seen these projects before.
Yes.
So I think it's the fact that they're on a priority list, but they're on a priority list with no funding, right?
Yeah, yes, at this moment. So I don't know if there's additional questions.
Questions? Go ahead, Ellen.
Just for clarification, is this our wish list prioritized, or is this what we used to call a shovel-ready list of prioritized?
I think it's kind of both. Some of them are more shovel-ready than others. We're in further stages. We are trying to look at getting some design on some of these projects further along in the process. So I-25 PEL, we're actually actively about ready to kickstart off the I-25 PEL Planning Environmental Linkage document to identify the needs along that corridor. So these projects are in various stages of readiness, but yeah, I think it's still a wish list that's already been identified through much of our NEPA process.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Tori, did you want to add anything to this?
Not to this one, he did great.
No. Okay, I'm
We
just
totally,
curious
the
about-
TAC totally support, here. The TAC members absolutely supported these projects. We know they're all needed. We know that I-25, we're actually probably going to recommend that I-25 North widening become our #1 project, and the rest of them sort of be bulleted projects of high importance.
Did you feel like did you discuss any other projects that should be on there or projects that should not be on there?
Definitely no projects that should not be on there.
Okay.
We did discuss some other projects that we'd sort of like to see on there, but we recognize that there's only so much money to go around. We also talked a little bit about moving some of the allocation of funding. Is that already reflected in this?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, because I
Yeah.
cannot see those.
That's not reflected in there what they saw.
Okay. Well,
Okay. Could you go through that change?
I can, and
That
so in
would-
fact, I've got
That'd be
copies
great.
here.
Thank you.
I'll hand those out and then briefly describe it. So the one big comment we received from TAC was the US 24 West, I-25 to Woodland Park drainage intersection improvements and resurfacing. That was, I believe, $30 million at the time. I-25 North widening, so Monument up to Castle Rock, was $20 million, to show that it was a #1 priority. They wanted to leave $5 million in the US 24 project and move the remaining $25 million to the I-25 corridor.
That'll be interesting.
Do you want me to explain that thought
Yeah, you can
process?
explain the thought process, because I know there's a lot of US 24 supporters here, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
We recognize that CDOT is going to need to make those improvements, that those drainage improvements are going to need to be made. They're going to need to pull this probably out of maintenance funding or RPP or something else and find it and do those projects. And asset management funding, another good source for that project. We see these as more visionary, big projects that have bold regional importance, not basically a maintenance project that they have to do anyway. So we said, okay, we'll let you leave a little bit on there because we know it's an important project, but we really think you need to focus on bold stuff and find another way to fund that one.
Find another way. find it. That's always an interesting conversation. So, okay, go ahead.
With regard to Highway 24 and the reduction from 30 million to 5 million for storm drainage, are any of those storm drainage projects that drop off the list, are they associated with the burn scar where we had the flooding?
They likely are. The reasoning behind that is this is money that we don't have yet, and it's money that we're going to need to probably have a voter initiative or something like that for. And we think that these drainage projects are going to need to be done before this money comes about. And that's why we think they need to find maintenance or asset management or some other money to utilize for those projects. We're not saying those projects don't need to be done. We're just saying you need to find a quicker source of funding than this potential one that's going to take them years to get to.
So the $25 million that's been transferred from 24 to I-25 is potential money?
It is all potential money. It
Okay.
is not real money.
Great.
I always find that fascinating. Was there another question? Go ahead, Alan.
No, let Bob, because mine's getting answered.
Where does Dr. Cobb, the extension of I-25 from County Line Road to South Castle Rock?
It is in their Tier 1.
That's a conversation.
Yeah, and I'll elaborate. I haven't seen their latest. They're going through this process at the same time, but the latest version that we saw, they had $270 million in that one. So that's actually reflected in the chart there in the comment section.
Are there any other changes you want to go ahead and highlight or mention in this yellow?
That was it from the
That's the
TAC
big-
meeting. Yep.
All right, thank you very much. Craig, go ahead.
Well, just, staff has been looking at these projects, and we aren't sure if we would follow the TAC recommendation
Right.
of reducing the 24 West, because it includes intersection improvements between I-25 and Woodland Park, so at 21st Street, 31st Street, and so we see that as priority projects, whether or not they're, we do want to get them done as soon as we can. They need to be done. We're not sure dropping them off of a priority list is a good idea, but we haven't had we need your recommendation also before we finalize our recommendation, so.
Well, before we would make a recommendation, would we have more information about the impact and what the other opportunities would be for funding for particular projects?
Right now, all of the funding that is reasonably available is included in our plan.
Okay.
So projects that don't have the funding aren't shown there. Does that make sense? So there's no reasonably available alternative to funding
For the
for those
drainage
projects.
issues?
Yeah. Well, except, and this is where we get CDOT headquarters, is it seems to us, both as TAC and staff, that those kind of drainage problems are exactly what the Transportation Commission's contingency fund is for. But that's not a reasonable source for us to count on. So I'd like to think that if we list it in our priority projects, and there's there's a lawsuit going through now on 24 drainage, that the combination of that would then get those projects done. So.
Just curiously, are there any federal emergency management money associated with any of those?
CDOT has used a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I think that well is dry at this point, so.
And so many of us are grateful. Thank you for that.
Well, it's CDOT, man. It's not
Yes,
me.
I'll just pass the message. We're very grateful that the emergency funds came through.
Vince, you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Kind of a last question. Before CDOT takes off, you do a lot of great work on your interchanges, but nobody comes back and maintains them afterward. For example, Woodman and I-25 right now, we've got all kinds of vegetation that is coming through the concrete, which affects the concrete stability. The roots go underneath and they spread out the concrete. I don't know who handles that, but if you would take that back to CDOT and have them, maybe it's a city that maintains those, I don't know. But if you've been at Woodman and I-25 and some of the other interchanges, they look horrible. And you did such a great job putting them in.
No, I'll bring that back to the appropriate folks. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And I, real quick.
Kevin or Scott, do you have a question?
Both of us do, I think.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
I just wanted an observation. the optics of 3.5% for Pikes Peak and Dr. Cog at 10 times as much don't look very good. And so I wonder, I mean, everybody wants to get more progress on this, but we had this trouble where the optics don't look very good and people are complaining politically, and I would expect that they're going to get more of that.
I would actually not focus on the Tier 1 and 2 combined. I would focus on just the Tier 1 because that's actually what's likely to be the list of projects.
Okay, so what would that be?
A smaller number, or a bigger number if you're Dr. Cog.
Focus on that.
So
Well,
I can answer
yeah,
both
I'm
that.
just making the observation.
So-
Doesn't look like our region.
Like everybody else uses that. isn't
No,
it?
you're absolutely right. So Tier 1, Tier 2, it shows 3.3. But as I mentioned before, we're actually in the process of adding the remaining NEPA projects that aren't on here. So the extension of Powers Boulevard, the extra work on Powers Boulevard, all of the improvements along the US 24 corridor. So those are hundreds of millions of dollars. That number will be going up. And then also for the Tier 1 projects, it's actually 6.6% across the state. And then for the region, it's 34.5% of the money that's been allocated. And then one more point before I forget.
Go ahead.
Is there is money for both 21st and 31st along US 24.
Okay,
So I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I know we are moving forward with some design.
that's good to hear. Okay, go ahead, Scott.
I had a general funding question. With the increases in cost of highway construction, we saw that at Cimarron and I-25 go from, $72 million to $111 million for basically the same project. How recently has these cost estimates been updated? Are these based on current construction costs, or are they a couple of years behind?
I think probably the best way to answer it is I know Pikes Peak put together a priority list. Some of those numbers have been adjusted upward. None of them have been adjusted downward. So it's still a ballpark
But they
figure.
reflect the costs as we know them to be now.
They're better, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, one last question here. Go ahead, Ray.
One of the things that we have to remember, when you guys have an accident on 25, you can divert around it. It's easy for you. We have an accident on 24, and that's what's been happening the last few months. We've been having some accidents at the intersections. We've been having accidents up and down it. It closes the highway.
Yep.
There's no way around it. We have to drive to Canyon City, which is a 3-hour drive, to get to Woodland Park. So the reason I like the fact that this is a priority, and it's on the list, and we're going to continue to maintain, this isn't just a drainage problem. If they shut down because of Waldo Canyon or flooding and things like that, and that's been really improved lately, so with those funds that he talked about earlier, it has made a big difference, and we really hasn't seen the roads closed due to water. But the intersections have become more and more of a concern. This is our heaviest part of the season. So yes, maybe later on it won't be quite as bad, but I do like the idea of keeping these things on the priority list, because when they take them off, it closes. It's not just an artery that you can bypass like a heart. We don't have any way to get home, and there's a lot of people. Being retired is wonderful. I don't have that problem. But for the people that aren't retired, that's the biggest complaint. I don't know how Helen's getting it, but I'm getting lots of complaints on Facebook, because I get on the Woodland Park community page and ask questions, get information. So a lot of the complaints I'm getting is, what are they doing to the intersections? What are they doing to improve? What are they doing to, and so I go to PM people information offline, because some of the stuff I try not to put on Facebook, because it's, oh my God, I spend too much time trying to explain it. So keep that in mind when you make a decision. If they don't fix the intersections, that intersection is going to close whenever there's a wreck. And so we have to continue to look at that. So I appreciate y'all's input, staying on the priority list, and keeping us in mind on that.
I do try and find a way around that first part, 31st Street. Just- Okay, wow, we have a lot of questions.
no, it's
Okay,
okay.
let's just try and narrow it. Go ahead.
I just want a quick clarification. So, Gloria, you indicated, and on the spreadsheet it indicates that 25 or 2.9 million was allocated to that 25 north and widening, correct?
Correct.
Because your thought is that the US 24 corridor, the work that needs to be done there is more immediate than where this funding would be possibly available.
Yes,
How I'm understanding.
you are correct.
And then, Rob, okay, you said that several intersections on 31st on US 24 has already funding available.
Design, not construction.
Right.
No, they have construction. 21st and
She's
31st have.
she's the money lady.
Money lady.
Okay. So there is funding for those key intersections that I think most of us are talking about here, concerned about. But then PPACG, you're not sure for, if you agree with the tax stance on this. Is that
Right, yeah. The TAC, and you will make your recommendation. Staff will talk about the two recommendations and put our recommendation to the board,
So
so.
I'm trying to understand where, the two sides are, and so if this is fake money or someday.
It is, it's-
Lottery money kind of a situation, then this is what we would do. So, I guess I'm wondering why you're against it.
Well, if US 24 is a priority, those intersections, and not just there up the pass, this list is likely to become the list that is written into legislation this next legislative session. I would like to make sure that it funds our actual regional priorities.
But the 25, I-25 is still within our region.
There's one part of it is. And like TAC did, I think we should make it it is the lifeblood of our region. It really is. It's the Main Street of the state. I mean, if you look at the percentage of population that lives within 5 or 10 miles of I-25 compared to any other road, so it's Colorado's Main Street and needs to be treated like that, so.
Right, and I find that as a company out here, we have to recruit from the Denver area, and having some, very accessible and user-friendly roadway system between Denver and Colorado Springs really enables us to welcome a better economy.
Yeah.
So,
And it also lets us become more of a bedroom community for them, too. Yeah, it is the critical route to our region right now, so.
So, Gloria, I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand this. I just want to make sure, so the US 24, even though we've reallocated some of the funds, US 24 is still staying on the priority list?
Still on the list with some money allocated to it, just moved some of the money that the first draft said into what we think is our number one priority, the I-25. Both projects still stay on. A little bit more money goes to I-25 than to the 24. And we're encouraging, nudge, nudge, CDOT to look at contingency funds, to look at the projects we already have funded, the two major intersections we already have funded. And we think that some of that work's going to need to be done sooner rather than later. So that was our thought process.
Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you. Good job.
Yeah, I was just gonna I was looking at the North Front Range with the two projects at 22% of funding, and I assume that's I-25 expansion north that we just read about was the Tiger Grant, the only Tiger Grant, right, for the state? So by emphasizing it as a priority for us could also increase our potential federal dollars, yes, no? Can you think that?
It would definitely increase the potential from infinitesimal to slightly better than infinitesimal. But yeah, it does.
Well, I mean, it happened for Fort Collins, that's what I'm saying, it's like, it does, Senator Bennett, should be our next call after that now.
Next time he's up for re-election.
Now,
So in 6 years,
We did get one for Charter Oak Ranch Road as well. Now, it's just a planning grant, it doesn't build it, but having those things as a priority in our area helps.
Rob?
In Dr. Cogg's mind, the I-70 East project versus the I-25 South project from Douglas County line to just south of Castle Rock, what's their primary wish?
I think it's safe to say it's I-70 Central. Very safe to say.
And just so you know, I-70 Central already has the money laid out for it. So
Can you guys
it's-
come to the microphone, please, so we get this on the record? Thank you.
Just so that you understand, I-70 Central already has the funding laid out for that project, so it's no longer in this list.
Because it's going to get done.
Total funding for that?
With 228 money, they took Faster Bridge money and they bonded against it, so we have the funding, because you can't get a project to the point that it is now without having the funding completely identified, because if you take it to FHWA, they won't even talk to you about it. So it has to be totally identified before you can even get their participation for reimbursement.
So if I'm taking that information and saying they have that taken care of, and that was a huge project.
Correct.
So that their focus can be on another Tier 1 project.
Correct.
Which would be that I-25.
Correct. Correct.
Well, thank you all very much.
Sure.
I think one of the things, I want to make sure we give Brian an opportunity to speak this evening. Rob, one of the things I wanted to ask is, I think what you did here is that people were very interested in both the strategy and the funding to all the projects, and making sure that the region gets the amount of dollars that
Right.
you see that politically, I think it's becoming more of a focus for this region to make sure we get the funding. So,
No, I understand, and like I said, we'll be adding more to that Tier 2, just so we don't lose track of them, and I think that percentage will change drastically, so.
great. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
And then, quick on the timeline. This is a very fast-track process, so we're hoping to get a draft completed by the end of August. So we're looking to go to the board here in August.
I tell you what, if you have
Recommendation.
information that the committee can review prior to the meeting, so we're not pounding you with questions during the meeting, any information that you have that can clarify some of the issues for us, I think that would be very helpful as soon as you have it on board. Prior to our meeting, which will be the end of August.
Okay,
Okay, so we meet the last Wednesday.
last Wednesday of August. Okay.
So if you get information before that we can review.
Is there anything else you need? I'm not hearing any changes to the list, so I'd just be coming back at the end of August to answer additional questions. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Brian, from the Joint Land Use Study, thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to reintroduce myself because now I'm in a different role. I was previously the planner with the Joint Land Use Study. Now I'm the program manager since Angela Essing has moved on. I just wanted to come and give you guys a quick update and ask for some feedback. Right now with the Joint Land Use Study, we recently completed the public survey to make sure we had a good spectrum of the compatibility issues that exist related to military operations and how that may be affecting residents, and how some things that occur in the development that occurs in the private sector may be affecting military operations. And we got a good confirmation that a lot of things we'd heard so far about what the issues were. The traffic, in some cases related to commuting, flight related to the U.S. Air Force Academy's flight training program. Some of these issues have been confirmed with the survey results, and we're compiling those and getting those into a good format for presentation. We'll be getting those around to everyone and get them on the website as soon as they're ready. With that, though, we had previously come to you to ask for volunteers from the CAC to be on the flight working group, which has been going very well. Vince and Hal have been providing great input on that committee, and they've been very valuable in this process. We're just about to move from the stakeholder presentations that we've been having, and everyone kind of understanding everyone's experience with the flight training at the Air Force Academy and how that may be affecting or intersect with some of the local interests. Now we're getting into the part where they're going to start to work on strategy development as to how to address certain issues or look for room for improvement with getting information out to the public as part of that. The second thing we've been working with is the Monument Creek Working Group. That's through the Fountain Creek Watershed and Greenway District. That's their process, but we're tying into that because a lot of the stormwater analysis that's done and data collection we'll be able to utilize in our report. So that's been going on, and I know that they had a couple of open houses last week. Matrix Design Group is helping the technical aspects on that, and we're going to kind of piggyback on some of the information that comes out from that study. The main reason why I wanted to come to you also is that we're looking as part of the transportation issues kind of spectrum. There in the past had been a lot of interest from the public in, of course, getting Santa Fe Trail open again. Now it is open. However, that doesn't mean the problem is solved. We want to continue to look at, as time goes on, we know that as command changes in the future at the Air Force Academy, there's the chance that the trail could be closed again periodically, or who knows. And so we're going to start a working group that we hope will meet, maybe have their first meeting at the end of August, maybe beginning of September, depending on how long it takes to get stakeholders at the table. And so we'd definitely like, again, a member of the CAC to be participating on this working group. Again, yes. So you guys can determine that amongst yourselves, but yeah. So, I mean, we really do want to try and get, one, we're also going to be having stakeholders that are going to be with local bicycle advocacy groups, other groups that are going to be involved with that, people from Colorado Springs that, are dealing with the trails. Colorado Springs, of course, has their 2016 Bicycle Master Plan update that they're working on right now, so this ought to dovetail nicely. So the goal of this working group will be to look at some strategies for how to either deal with potential closure, and then at the same time also look at what will it take to keep that trail open. And then also looking very long term, what are some other things that may be natural threats that may affect that trail. There's been some washouts on that trail just from Monument Creek. And so it's, just from a realistic perspective, there may be, given some of the topography on other parts of the creek that are off the installation, there is a chance that in the future there may be repeated damage to that trail that may mean we need to look at something long-term before that happens. And so that may be one of the other kind of veins that this working group. Anyway, it'll be up to the working group to try and figure out what those strategies are. So that's the thing I wanted to bring to all of you is if there was someone that could represent the CAC, one or two people, I'd say, that could represent.
We'll talk to Rachel, and she'll get you the names of the people that are interested.
Perfect.
Does that work?
Yes, absolutely.
So right now, the only working group that you need participation in right now is the one with the Santa Fe Trail.
That's correct. We're trying to find someone to fill my old position, so we're rolling these working groups out as we have the staff time for them.
Sure.
And the flight working group is getting to a point where they're into a different phase. And then in the future, some of the working groups that may come up once the Policy and Technical Committee have fully threshed them out with the Joint Land Use Study may be related to noise around Fort Carson. So that's going to be more in the Pueblo area. So that's, we'll see where that goes, but we're not quite at that point. That's something we've gotten from the surveys, that there are people in Pueblo West that are do experience noise issues, and so that may be another group, but I don't know if that'll be within the realm of the PPACG literal area. So, but we'll work on that one. And then there's going to be some other working groups that may come up with other transportation issues in the future. We're just starting with bicycle because that was something that was prevalent amongst the citizen feedback. So we're really trying to respond to that first and then go with the other issues that are less urgent in some respects.
Well, we appreciate the willingness that you have to work with us and have representation from our group, because people have a lot of great experience to share with the group.
Absolutely, and it's been, as I said, it's been very valuable having members of this committee on the flight working group, so we will continue that. So, any questions for me while I'm here? Yes.
Yeah, the last meeting that you had a couple of citizens talk about their concerns.
Yes.
Could you summarize some of the concerns that they brought up at that meeting? And
Sure.
were you able to record it?
Yes, I was able to record it. I just need to get it off my phone. I managed it. That was what I had. I just need to figure out how to get. I've never done that brand new phone. Got to figure out how to do that, but I will get that to you.
Concerns, maybe?
Yeah. So we had We had three citizens that spoke. One hasn't experienced too many issues, and that's just what he wanted to mention. And he's kind of on the south end under the approach. So, of course, the flights coming in are usually throttling down. So we think that's one of the reasons why he's not getting too much noise. The other two citizens that did speak, there were kind of two prongs. One, they're both concerned about safety related to just the planes flying over. In many cases, the planes either appear to be very low relative to what people are used to, and then also just concern. One of the citizens had concerns about the particular model of plane. So it got very technical, and some of this is a matter of just having the Air Force look at having the Air Force hear some of these citizen perspectives, because we have some new people at Air Force, some of the command switches over, and so there was a good discussion actually between citizens and some of the Air Force on just clarification of what is actually happening with some of these airplanes during training. And it kind of, I think, helped with addressing some of the concerns, because some citizens had read through the manual of the airplane and thought, well, you're not supposed to be doing this maneuver. Is the Air Force doing this maneuver or not? And the Air Force was able to respond to that. So also just the Air Force understanding that there's been some things in the past that weren't handled in the best way, and citizens were able to express that. And I think part of it is, being able to vocalize some of these things goes a long way with trying to address the issue, just getting it out there. And so I think that went really well. We also had the developers talking about how there's going to be a ton more development that is potential to happen further north because of the housing market, and how that may impact future residents that may start to live in houses that weren't there before underneath flight paths. So that's kind of informing the strategies going forward that we need to look at. How do we help potential new residents get the information they need to understand what it is to live next to the Air Force Academy in all its
We want
all
to
its
help them
aspects.
understand they're buying a house in a place that has planes fly over.
That is exactly
That would be
right.
good.
That is exactly right. In some cases, part of the issue that was identified is the fact that many of the homeowners, they bought their houses at a time when the flight training program was less intense. And so that's one of the things we're realizing. Also, there is some sound data collection that is ongoing to identify how that sound kind of fits into the overall residential soundscape, and therefore will give some context. We may be able to say, well, it's this particular area, this one part of the flight path may be the area that seems to be getting the worst of it. And that'll help inform if we can figure that out, and how topography plays into that. So part of it is information, is helping residents get access to the information they need so that they can make an informed decision when they are buying a house. That's one of the things that may come through this process. So I'm excited to see where this committee goes as we start to get into strategy development. And of course, I'll be here periodically to give you further updates as I have something. So
Thank you for coming today.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on your new job.
thank you. It's good to still be here, too. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're at CAC announcements, right? Items for next meeting. Okay, Roger, did I understand that this is your last meeting?
November will be my last meeting.
November will be your last meeting. Okay, I was going to say, I didn't think so.
It's not the day, is it?
No, it's November. It's November. I thought so. I'm going, no, I don't think Rogers, this is his last meeting. Well, great. No, I was going to say, yikes. Not ready for you to leave, okay?
Thank you. Well, you're one of my favorite children.
Thanks. I needed that today. Okay, do we have any CAC announcements? Anybody have anything wild and exciting going on in their area of our region?
Ooh, wild and exciting. This is probably more for City of Colorado Springs reps and at-large people, but I was appointed to the city's districting advisory council for the redistricting process for city council. So if that is an area of interest for you, it's an interesting process to be involved in for sure, or if you have feedback as far as communities you want considered or particular precincts that you don't feel fit with like districts. Those are very specific questions to ask, but our public meetings give you a little more background. So if the process of figuring out what communities are represented by which districts is interesting to you, I'm happy to either send out to the whole group or you can come chat with me afterwards. But your feedback would be very appreciated. We've kind of been gathering broad public input, but we're about to recommend some specific changes to precincts, and that's what it really is. So I will send that out to all of you if you're interested.
Yes, please do. Yeah, do we agree that we'd all like to see that information?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Courtney, do you have any preliminary maps that we could look at or anything like that?
Absolutely, yeah. There are not preliminary proposed changes yet, but we have preliminary maps with updated population figures and updated precincts. So it gives you a starting point. We also have maps that sort of overlay income, minority characteristics, and currently identified neighborhoods, but would love feedback as far as trade areas that might be affected, and kind of coalescing some of the districts. We went from 4 to 6 districts in our most recent municipal in 2012. So time we've done the redistricting process, especially with an advisory committee. So the more input we can get, the better. So I'll make sure to send all those out.
Great, if you can go ahead, Mark, Rachel,
Yeah.
handle that, because everybody will recognize an email. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Yep, go ahead.
Bronc Days in Green Mountain Falls.
The
It's
what?
always Bronc Days. It's
Oh.
always a great thing for kids. It's got lots of crafts and stuff. If you want to go to Cripple Creek this week, I'd actually say not go, because it's the Hells Angel Convention from national-wide, all over the country's meeting there. No problems whatsoever, but it is a little bit interesting to be going up the interstate on your motorcycle and here comes 80 guys with Hells Angels on it. So don't worry about it. It's all being taken care of.
Thank you.
Forgot to mention the firefighter pancake breakfast.
Firefighter pancake breakfast,
Yes.
right, Forsyth.
Yeah.
And I'll jump in on both and Ray, and say that tomorrow officially the Ute Pass Saddle Club starts their first time in the past decade rodeo for 3 days. Please come up if you like small county rodeos. This is guaranteed to be nothing but fun. And starting Saturday, we have the Teller County Fair going on, and no, it's not big like El Paso County, but it sure is fun. Please come, and it'll go for 9 days.
Do you have a duck race?
I don't know about a duck race.
Okay.
The city of the duck race, yay!
It's 5:02. Thanks so much. We'll see you next month.
Can we give Brian, give us an update on the transit move?